May I have your attention, please? Shabbat Shalom, everyone. My name is son of Yisrayl Hawkins, and I'd like to serve you forever as a priest starting very soon. It's now time to start finding your seats for Sabbath services. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. My name is son of Yisrayl Deacon Buffalo Bill, and I'd like to serve you as a priest starting very soon. It's a privilege and honor to present to you the sons and daughters of Yisrael now entering the sanctuary. I now present one of the sons of Yisrael, Benaiah.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. May the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. You may be seated. The title of my speech today will be like a picture. What is a picture? Or what is the definition of a picture? From the Webster's dictionary, it is to draw or to paint a picture of anything, or to describe very clearly in words, to form a mental image of something or someone. People have their photos taken while smiling, but not while angry nor sad. Pastor Yisrayl Hawkins is an example of a person who is always smiling. Look at the prophetic words magazine. You can see him smiling. A picture never changes. The image stays the same. In the same way, we need to be righteous and stay that way. Let's say someone came and stepped on your toes. We have to have the righteous character, forgive the person, and keep smiling. Or let's say someone came to bully you. You have to stay smiling and do not retaliate. They will stop. I have a question for you. If someone disrespects you, is it okay to disrespect them? The answer will always be no. Pastor does not retaliate, and we should follow him. Turn to Exodus 23 verse 2 in page 63. Do not follow the crowd in doing evil. When you give testimony in a lawsuit, do not pervert justice by siding with the crowd. A picture will have the same image for 100 years. No matter what, we must be respectful. Pastor tells us to remain joyous, and we should obey always. Turn to Colossians 3 verse 20 in page 927. Children, obey your parents in all things, for this is well pleasing to Yahweh. And you may turn to Ephesians 6 verse 2 in page 919. Children, obey your parents in Yahweh, for this is right. Honor your father and mother, which is the first commandment with a promise. There is a difference there is a difference between these two pictures. There is this picture. Pastor Yisrayl Hawkins is smiling, he is self-controlled and neatly dressed. And there is another picture right here. An angry pastor without self-control who cannot afford a smile. He is teasing the audience. He is teasing the audience and he is touching him without permission. You can see he is trespassing. Yahweh is smiling. Yahshua is always smiling. Pastor Yisrayl Hawkins is always smiling. And the congregation is smiling. It is because we have decided to be like Yahweh, to be like the picture. Turn to Proverbs 15 verse 30 in page 5 or 6. The light of the eyes brings joy to the heart, and glad news makes the bones fat and sound and healthy. The Christians are very angry because their God is asleep. He will wake up whenever he feels like or whenever he thinks like. The Christians have so many posters written, "Pray for rain, pray for rain." Their crops are drying and still there is no rain. And yet they still go every Sundays to where pigs are slaughtered, saying, "Oh, we are going to the Holy Father," but they don't know she is asleep. Turn to Yakanan 8 verse 44. You are of your teacher, who is Satan the devil, and whatever she who is your teacher desires, you will do. She was a murderer from the beginning and remained not into the truth, because there is no truth in her. Therefore, when you speak your falsehood, you speak her words, because she is a liar and a teacher of all lies. God and Jesus are very lazy and angry. But if they will just change and come to the house of Yahweh, they will be smiling. And with that, you may stand up.
If all remain standing, it's my great honor and privilege to present to you the great son of Yisrayl, Deacon Yasser Hawkins.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. May the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. You may be seated. Today my title is The Righteous Will Rule. The scriptures show us that all these things will take place. Please turn to Matthew 24, verse 29 to 31 on page 753. And it says, "Immediately but after the of those days will the sun be darkened, and the moon will not give her light, and the stars will fall from heaven, and the powers of the heavens will be shaken. And then will appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven, and then all these tribes of the earth mourn, and they will see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. And he will send his malachim with a great sound of the trumpet, and they will gather together his elect from the four winds, from one end of earth to the other. The righteous will rule the righteous will rule the earth under the direction of Yahweh and his laws. Please turn to Matthew 20, verse 25 to 28 on page 748. And it says, "But Yahshua summoned them and said, 'You know that the rulers of Gentile exercise control over them, and they who are greater still exercise authority over them. But they must not be so among you. For whoever will be great among you, let him be your servant. And whoever will be first among you, he must be a slave. Just as the Son of Man did not come to be waited on, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many.' There is no peace without Yahweh's laws of peace, joy, and love. A renewed world is coming. This renewed world that is coming will be filled with peace, joy, and abundant living. It will be filled with true love, which is the keeping of Yahweh's laws. This renewed world will be so beautiful, we cannot even imagine it. Please turn to Isaiah 65, verse 17. And it says, "For behold, I create new heavens and a new earth, and the former will not be remembered nor come into mind." Please turn to Daniel 12, verse 3 on page 684. And it says, "And those who are wise will shine as the brightness of heavens, and those who turn many to righteousness as the stars forever." The righteous will be as bright as the heavens. We will teach people Yahweh's laws of peace. Please turn to Matthew 7, verse 22 through 23. And it says, "Many will say to me in that day, 'Teacher, teacher, have we not prophesied in your name, and cast out demons in your name, and in your name perform many wonderful works?' But then I will declare to them, 'I never knew you. Get away from me, you who practice iniquity, you who break the law of Yahweh.'" Please turn to Revelation 17, verse 5. And it says, "And upon her head was a name written, Mystery Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and the abominations of the earth." Yes, the Mystery Babylon will not rule. Daniel 7, please turn to Daniel 7, verse 24 through 27 on page 679. "And the 10 horns out of this kingdom were the 10 kings that will rise, and another will rise after them, and he will subdue from the first ones, and he will subdue 3 kings. And he will speak great words against Yahweh, and will wear out, mentally attack, to cause to fall away the saints of Yahweh, and think to change times, Yahweh's feast days and laws. And they will be given into his hand until a time and the dividing of time. But the judgment will sit, and they will take away his government to consume and to destroy it completely. Then the kingdoms of governments and the greatness of the kingdoms under the whole heaven will be given to the people of the saints of Yahweh, whose kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and all governments will serve and obey him." Please turn to Daniel 7:11 on page 679. And it says, "I beheld, then because of the voice of the great words which the horn spoke, I beheld until the beast was slain and his body destroyed and given to the burning flame." Please turn to Revelations 19, verse 7 through 9 on page 983. Let us be glad and rejoice and give honor to him, for the marriage of the Lamb is come, and the house of Yahweh, all the virgins who have been chosen have made themselves ready. And to them was granted that they should be arrayed in fine linen, clean and white, for the fine linen is the righteous of the saints. And he said to me, Write, blessed are those who are called unto the marriage supper of the Lamb. And he said to me, These are the true sayings of Yahweh. If we practice righteousness, we will be invited to the supper with Yahshua. In conclusion, please turn to Revelations 21, verse 7. And it says, He who overcomes will inherit all things, and I will be his father, and he will be my son. And if you all please stand, I'll turn it over to the next speaker, Deacon Yisrayl David.
Shalom, everyone. Please be seated. It's funny, Yeshurun just pretty much gave my speech, but I guess I'll go ahead and give it again. Anyway, I'm going to be speaking about the sons of Yahweh. If you remember, recently Pastor spoke about the sons of Yahweh and the Malachim who left their first estate, and what that first estate was, being the first position, the highest position that they were given. If you turn over to the book of Yada, chapter 1. Book of Yada only has one chapter. But verse 6, it says, And the Malachim who did not keep their first estate, speaking of the first position, the highest position, but left their own habitation, he has reserved in everlasting chains under darkness and until the judgment of the great day. So the Malachim left their first estate, meaning they left that position. They didn't qualify for it. They didn't do their job. They were offered the highest position, but they abused it. They destroyed the earth before mankind was put on it, if you remember. In the fourth book of Israel, the Reverence of Yahweh series, chapter 21, it's the Reverence of Yahweh number 14, dated 12/16/1989, on page 197. In verse 8, he says, Keep in mind what I keep telling you, that Yahweh has a special group. You are that special group of people. He tells you this over and over and over throughout the scriptures, but it's never been seen before. It's never been understood or brought out before. The apostles knew about it because they talked about it. The prophets before them knew it too. The patriarchs spoke of you as a people. The patriarchs, prophets, and apostles are included in this special group of people. They were of the first callings of Yahweh. Those who Yahweh calls his special treasure will always be special and have special honor bestowed upon them. I want you to understand this and understand why. So this first position that was given to the Malachim, or the sons of Yahweh, the original ones, they abused it, so Yahweh is giving it to us, to people who are full of flaws, full of problems, but he says, I will make you perfect, and I will allow you to have this first position. I will allow you to rule the universe and bring peace to the universe. He said, there's a reason for you being so special to Yahweh, along with Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and all of the 144,000 priesthood that Yahweh's finishing up now. You are special to him, and you will be throughout all eternity. Yahweh himself gives us an example of how special you are to him. Remember how Abraham waited all of his life to have a son? You know, a righteous son that he could lead and guide? Look how old he was before he finally had a son. He was 100 years old, 99 to 100 years old. Can you imagine the joy in that man's heart when Sarah gave birth to a son when he was in his old age? This made this event so much more important to Abraham. He actually saw the significance in it. And Yahweh used that son to bring forth righteousness. Yahweh has waited longer than Abraham did. So he's using the comparison of Abraham and Yahweh, showing just how much Yahweh desired this family, just how much Yahweh wanted to bring forth righteousness to the universe. Yahweh finally sees his family developing. We're in the last days now when that family is going to be born. We are going to be born one day. In one day this is going to take place. Yahweh sees us now in the mother's womb, so to speak. And you remember the comparison that Pastor's given before of the woman in childbirth, how the world is bringing forth this nuclear baby, or this sinful baby, and the house of Yahweh is also coming forth as the sons of Yahweh. So, and the labor pains are taking place, so to speak. We are very dear to him, and he tells us that over and over. So in these last days, we're offered the position of being the sons of Yahweh, but not the physical sons of Yahweh. We will be the family of Yahweh, but through obedience and righteousness. Yahshua, of course, was the first one who fully received this position. He fully received this position of being perfect and being the son of Yahweh. If you'll turn over to Matthew, chapter 17, in verse 5, this is a Yahweh saying, "Here's my beloved son." In verse 5, it says, "While he still spoke, behold, a bright cloud overshadowed them. Then behold, there was a voice out of the cloud which said, 'This is my beloved son, in whom I am well pleased. Listen to him.'" So Yahshua was the son of Yahweh. He was the firstborn. We call him the firstborn, who was led and perfected by the faith. And in the same way, we're being led and perfected by the faith, and that shows us that it's not, Yahshua wasn't some angel who was, begotten and was a pre-existing God. No, he was man. He was the son of Yosef and Miriam, and he was able, through the bloodline that was brought forth, the guarding of the bloodline, and the training that his father and mother gave him, he was able to overcome sin, to not sin, to resist the temptation to sin, and become perfect, just like we can. But he became the son of Yahweh because he developed Yahweh's character inside of him. That's why he was the firstborn of many brothers, or he is the firstborn of many brothers, because he was the first to be perfected. If you'll turn over to 1 Yochanan chapter 3, 1 Yochanan chapter 3 and verse 1, and it shows us that we are the sons of Yahweh. It says, "Behold," on page 965, "Behold, what manner of love the Father has bestowed upon us." Remember what Pastor said. Yahweh's been waiting for a long, long time to have this family, this son. Remember, behold, what manner of love the Father has bestowed upon us, that we should be called the sons of Yahweh. Therefore the world does not know us, because it did not know him, but we're the children of Yahweh. So we are the sons of Yahweh. If you'll turn over to Hebrews chapter 7. Hebrews chapter 7. Yahshua also talks about this son of Yahweh, the sons of Yahweh. Hebrews chapter 7 and verse 3. It's talking about Melchizedek here. Remember, Melchizedek was the one who trained Abraham. He was the priest to Abraham. It talks about how he was the king of righteousness, the king of peace, meaning he was a teacher of righteousness, just like we have a teacher of righteousness in these last days, who is Yisrayl Hawkins. It says, "Melchizedek's father and mother were not recorded in the genealogies. Neither was the beginning of his days nor the end of his life. But he was a representation of the son or the sons of Yahweh for the continuance of the priesthood." So he was the one who was actually training and leading Abraham to be the father or the ancestor or the example of righteousness for the sons of Yahweh, for the continuance of the priesthood. So he's also a son of Yahweh and also a teacher to the sons of Yahweh. Now, if you remember the Pharisees and the Sadducees, which are, the ones who hold the ruling scepter at this time, so to speak, they believe that you have to be, of a certain bloodline. You have to be specifically, your father has to be a priest, or a Pharisee or a Sadducee or whatever, and that gives you the authority to become a priest, or to become the one that Yahweh has chosen. But if you notice, Pastor said we're becoming priests after the order of Melchizedek, meaning, we can be called out of the most sin-sick world. It doesn't matter if our father was a priest or if our mother was, part of the priestly family. No, we're being called out to become priests because of our tests and trials and the things that we overcome. And we know Yahweh is righteous because his laws bring peace, and we learn to love the laws. That's what makes us priestly material. So just like the order of Melchizedek, we're becoming priests. And let's look over to chapter 2 and verse 9. It says, "But we see Yahshua, who was also made a little lower than the Malachim," meaning he wasn't a Malach who, came to earth. He was also made a little lower than the Malachim, like Psalm says. All of us, human beings, are made a little lower than the Malachim at this time. But he was crowned with glory and honor because of his having suffered death, in order that he, through the love of Yahweh, might taste death for everyone. So he's the sin offering. He's the sacrifice that was brought for us. And if we repent and confess, we have that offering, that sacrifice. For it was fitting for him, on account of whom are all things, and through whom are all things, in bringing many sons to glory, which is us, those sons that he's bringing to glory, to lead the prince of their salvation to perfection through sufferings. Let's jump down to verse 15. Remember, Yahshua is that sacrifice, and he delivers those who through fear of death were all their lifetime subject to bondage. The world today, do they have any hope in Yahweh? No. In fact, they say you're going to die and go to heaven and all these things, but then after somebody dies, they have a big funeral and everybody's crying, and it's a terrible thing because they don't believe their God. They say we're going to go to heaven, but then they don't actually believe that. They have that fear that they're going to die. All throughout the world, they have fear that they're going to die. We're the only ones who are actually promised eternal life, and that, we have that hope in Yahweh, because we know if we keep his laws, Yahweh keeps his promises. So the world has to rely on the quartet to take care of them and protect them. But that quartet, which is the four horns of the altar, is the ones that are bringing them down to death, to destruction. So that's what they have to look to right now. But we don't fear because we have Yahshua, who was the offering for us. If you'll turn over to Revelation chapter 21, and verse 7, Yeshurun just used this scripture as well, the great future priest Yeshurun. It says, he who overcomes, speaking of us, will inherit all things. Remember, Yahweh said that our minds can't even comprehend right now what Yahweh has in store for us. Will inherit all things, and I will be his father, and he will be my son. The sons of Yahweh, that same position that was offered to the Malachim, that they rejected and refused, we're being offered that position, this little group that Yahweh has called out. But the fearful and unbelieving and the abominable, remember the world fears death. They don't believe Yahweh. They commit all these abominations that bring death. And murderers and whoremongers and sorcerers and worshippers of gods, which the whole world does, and all liars will have their part in the lake which burns with fire and brimstone, which is the second death. Now remember, Pastor said that Yahweh's not going to drag you to some lake burning with fire, and kicking and screaming. No, when you sin and you become a part of the world, you're going to die in the mess that the world brings upon themselves. This quartet in the world is bringing destruction upon themselves, which is going to burn them up. So the world is the ones who are in the lake burning with fire and brimstone, which is the second death. Now, in the book of Jeremiah, chapter 23, and verse 6 here, it says, in his days Yada will be saved, and Israel will dwell safely. And it speaks about the branch who is going to be leading the people here. Of course, pastor is that righteous branch. And this is the name that he will proclaim to them, Yahweh Tzidiknu, Yahweh our righteousness. Therefore, behold, the days come, says Yahweh, that they will no longer say, as surely as Yahweh lives, who brought the children up out of the land of Egypt, but they will say, as surely as Yahweh lives, who brought up and led the seed of the house of Israel out of the protected place. Now, what is that speaking of? That's speaking of us in this time period. Yahweh has led and brought us up out of the protected place in the midst of a world who's, killing themselves, who's destroying themselves. They're dying of diseases and all kind of other things. And from the countries where I had driven them, and they will dwell in their own land. Now, pastor says in this same sermon, and this was in 1989 he's bringing this stuff out. So that's amazing that the same stuff he's bringing out now, he's brought out in several places before. But he says, you have to understand that your blessings are greater, brethren, because you have had so much more to overcome than the people who are going to come after the millennium is over, and they're going to have to overcome. And that's why they're going to be the ones saying, blessed is Yahweh who brought this huge group out of the protected place. Not Moshe, who was in history, but we're going to be the bigger story at that time. They're going to be able to see the work you've done and what Yahweh has done. There will be no doubts about it then. They will have two periods of history to go by. The time when Satan was in control, and then the time when Yahweh was in control. You only have one to go by right now, the one Satan has controlled for these 6,000 years. But they're going to actually see, when the sons of Yahweh were controlling the earth, there was peace and joy. And they're actually going to be able to look at those two and compare and choose, I want righteousness. Praise Yahweh. It says, no, we don't have Yahweh Shema sitting here on earth at this time to look at. We don't have the saints who have been promised that kingdom because they overcame, to physically look upon for help. So it's offered to us if we overcome. And they, the ones that we're leading afterwards, will have us to look at and say, these people were able to overcome. That's what makes the difference between our reward and the reward of those who will come later. Because we're actually going to have overcome at that time. It says, the sons of Yahweh are going to fulfill this, and we are going to bring peace to this world. The others could have done that if they hadn't rejected the laws of Yahweh. Speaking of the ones who Yahweh gave the position first. They could have done that, but they rejected the laws of Yahweh. So don't reject the laws of Yahweh. Regardless of how crazy things get, regardless of how hard things get, maintain a positive attitude in your work. I know even as long as I've been in the house of Yahweh, you always think, man, I want to go work over here. Because over here is going to be better. It has this person, it has this going on. And then you get there, and what are there? The same tests and trials that you were going in the old place, you're going through here. Why? Because you have things that you need to work on in your mind. Yahweh's not going to let you run away scot-free. You still have to overcome those same things. So even if you go work over here, you're going to have to go work with these same things and these same problems. So don't run away from your tests and trials. Okay? Take them like a man. Remember what Yahweh told Job? Take them like a man, stand up and overcome these things. Because those are the same tests and trials that the people we're leading are going to have to go through. And we're going to be able to show them, this is how I overcame it. This is how you should overcome it. So everybody take your tests and trials like a man. And maintain a positive attitude. Smile. Remember, they're just tests and trials. They're not things to stress out over. And if you'll all please stand. I'd like to turn it over to the next speaker, the Great Yahshua Hawkins.
Praise Yahweh. Shalom, great family of Yahweh. You may be seated. May the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. Today I'm going to start off by reminding us of two things that Pastor says on a regular basis. And to me, these two things are the most important things that I think he's ever said. And again, this is for me, this is my personal thoughts on it. And what he said, and he says these things continually. One, he says, pay attention to every word that comes out of his mouth. Okay, pay attention to every word that comes out of his mouth, because everything that comes out of his mouth means life to us. Okay, all of his words mean life to us. And the second thing that he says on a regular basis is that we need to have the entire book of Yahweh in our heads. Okay, we need to have the entire book of Yahweh in our heads. So if we use those two things and think about those things on a regular basis and actually listen to everything that he says, actually apply ourselves to the study of the word of Yahweh, then while he's teaching, we can continue to overcome and be prepared for this great kingdom of Yahweh. And so that's why I said that to me, those are two of the most important things that he said, because those are the things that's going to allow us to be made ready for Yahweh's great kingdom. His teachings, which are according to the every word of Yahweh. So the first scripture that I want to turn to is in Revelations chapter 10, verse 7. Revelations 10, verse 7. In the days, it's on page 977 in Revelations. In the days of the voice of the seventh Malach, when he will begin to sound, the great secret of Yahweh would be finished, as he declared to his servants, the prophets. Okay, so here we see that the great voice, this voice of the seventh Malach, when he begins to sound. So what is this sound that we're hearing? Is it like an A flat, A sharp, or is it something totally different? It's something totally different. The sounds that we hear from this Malach is the teachings, the warnings, the laws, the judgments, the statutes, the ordinances, the training and character education, everything that's necessary to turn us from death to life. Okay, so this is the sound of this seventh Malach. And Yahweh inspired the prophet Isaiah to also refer to this seventh Malach as something else. He said, lift up your voice like a what? Like a trumpet. He said, cry loud, spare not. Lift up your voice like a trumpet and show my people their sins. Okay, that's part of this sound of this seventh Malach in these last days, lifting up his voice like a trumpet. So it's very important that we understand the teachings and the things that's coming forth from the great witness. So turn over to Psalms chapter 89 on page 469. Psalms chapter 89, because we're going to continue to explore the sound of this Malach, the voice of this Malach, the sound of this trumpet, and the great blessings that come with it. In Psalms 89, verse 15, the scripture reads, "Blessed are the people who understand the sounding of the trumpet." Okay, blessed are the people who understands the sounding of the trumpet. Again, is it a musical note? Absolutely not. It's the teachings that's coming forth from the witness in these last days, from the seventh Malach, this trumpet of Yahweh. It says, "Oh Yahweh, we will walk in the light of your presence." Now, this is also speaking about pastor again, because Yahweh said that I will give you as a what to the nations? The words right there. Light. I will give you as a light to the nations, right? He's giving pastors a light to the nations. And he's actually allowing us to be able to see Yahweh so that we can enter into his presence. Okay, so blessed are the people who understand the sounding of this trumpet, or understand the teachings that's coming out. Because remember, before the house of Yahweh, were we fit for eternal life? Absolutely not. Okay, so when we came here and kept the first Sabbath, were we fit for the kingdom of Yahweh? Absolutely not. Okay, so I remember when I came here, hey, kingdom can come, I'm here, first Sabbath, I know the name of Yahweh, this is the Sabbath day, let's go. There's no way that I was ready for the kingdom of Yahweh. I'm still actually being trained for the kingdom of Yahweh. Okay, we all are. Okay, because there's a change that has to take place within us so that we can be ready for the great kingdom of Yahweh. Okay, and that change comes from hearing the teachings of the great witness. Okay, and that's why it's important that we hear every word that comes out of his mouth and have the book of Yahweh in our head. Because without that combination, we're not going to be fit for the kingdom of Yahweh. Okay, let's look over at 1 Corinthians. 1 Corinthians chapter 15. Because remember, there's a change that has to take place. Okay, remember in the book of Malachi, it says that the laws of Yahweh, the strength of Yahweh, the laws of Yahweh will do what to the hearts and the mind? It'll change the hearts and the mind. And that's the only way that we're going to be fit for the kingdom of Yahweh, is if we allow this change to take place. Okay, in 1 Corinthians chapter 15, we'll start in verse 51 here. It says, "Behold, I show you a secret truth." A secret truth. Now, remember we just read in Revelations where it says that the great secrets of Yahweh will be revealed, through when the voice of the seventh Malach, when he begins to sound, when he begins to teach these things. So here he says, "I show you a secret truth. We will not all sleep, but we will all be changed. In a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, at the last trumpet, for the trumpet will sound, and the dead will be raised incorruptible and will be changed." So the way that we read that, we think that that's going to be like all at the same time. That, there's going to be a sounding of a trumpet, the dead's going to be raised, and then we're all going to be changed. Like it says in verse 50, we're not going to have the flesh with the blood, but the flesh with the substance that sustains eternal life, right? It's not all going to occur at the same time. Part of this is actually taking place right now, because we're being changed right here in 52. It says, at the last trumpet. Okay, hearing the sound of this trumpet is actually changing our lives so that we can qualify for what it's talking about in verse 50, to have this spiritual change so that we can live forever. So this is a process that's taking place. So we have to go through this first change initially, which is changing our lives, actually learning how to perform righteousness before we can qualify for the other change, which is the reward and living forever. So there's a lot of things that we have to do. And the only way that we can qualify for, the reward is by understanding and applying the teachings in our everyday lives. Okay, it's not going to be an instantaneous thing. We're not just going to hear a sound in the clouds and then we're just made perfect. Okay, that's Christianity. Okay, we all have to understand that the only way that we're going to qualify for the rewards that Yahweh has to offer us is by listening to the one that he sends and then being diligent to apply those teachings in our everyday lives. And then look down to verse 55 here. It says, "O death, where is your sting? O Sheol, the grave, where is your victory?" Okay, why? Because we're going to overcome death because of the sounding of this trumpet, because he's teaching us how to live to the point where death will no longer have an effect on us because we're not doing those things which leads to death. That's how important the sounding of the trumpet is for us in these last days and throughout all of eternity. Okay, praise Yahweh. And when you look at verse 26 on the page 898, it says the last enemy that will be destroyed is death. Okay, why? Because Yahweh is preparing a family in these last days through the witness so that we all can go out teaching the same thing that we're learning here today, putting an end to sin and suffering, to sickness and disease. Okay, we're all going to be out teaching people how to live, turning from death to life. Okay, and this is the job of the great house of Yahweh in these last days. And that's why the deacon, one of the reasons why the deacon before me, when he was speaking, he was saying how important we are to Yahweh. Okay, we're important to Yahweh because we're going to be the guards and the protectors of life, making sure that these things flourish throughout all of eternity. Okay, protecting everything that Yahweh created. Okay, this plan is a plan for what? Life. Okay, this plan is a plan for life, and we're a part of Yahweh's plan for life because Yahweh has care and concern for everything that he's created, and he's actually going to turn that over to us to guard and to protect it. Okay, he's not just going to give it to anyone. We have to be very diligent and to prove to Yahweh that he can trust us. And that's what we're doing in these last days, proving to Yahweh that he can trust us with his most prized possession, which is life. Okay, life. Continuing on here, actually I want to go over to Romans. I want to go over to Romans chapter 12, because I want to kind of change up a little bit here. Because part of the teachings, again, is the correction, the chastenings that we get. Because, again, when we came to Yahweh's house, we were not fit for Yahweh's kingdom. Okay, and so Pastor had to teach us and remove all of the God worship from us through his words. Okay, and so we had to get a lot of correction, right? Still do, right? Yeah. And so the correction is a blessing, and we should be thankful that we're loved enough to be corrected, because Yahweh says, when you receive this chastening, I deal with you as sons, as children. Okay? A father who doesn't love his children won't say anything to him. We will not correct them. But Yahweh loves us, so we're constantly corrected to turn us from death. Okay, remember in the book of Job, it says that Yahweh does things twice, even 3 times for a man to turn them from Sheol, the grave, where he's going. So when we're corrected, we shouldn't argue with the ones who's trying to save our lives. Okay, we should say, hey, thank you. Because Yahweh's house is helping us to find eternal life. Praise Yahweh. Here in Romans, I want to read these couple scriptures here because I want to set it up because we want to talk about Cain and Abel for a minute. Chapter 15, verse 16. That I might become a minister of Yahshua Messiah to the Gentiles, which with the priestly duty of proclaiming the message of Yahweh, so that the Gentiles might become an offering acceptable to Yahweh, sanctified by Spirit, holy. Okay, I want to read that one more time. Okay, that I might become a minister of Yahshua Messiah to the Gentiles with the priestly duty of proclaiming the message of Yahweh, so that the Gentiles might become an offering acceptable to Yahweh, sanctified by Spirit, holy. So here, this man's duty, his priestly duty, was to teach the message of Yahweh so that the people could be prepared to enter into the kingdom of Yahweh. And that was Shaul's duty at that time. And now look at Romans chapter 10. Chapter 12. Romans chapter 12 on page 882. Okay, and these are some more great teachings here that was always in the house of Yahweh. Therefore, I appeal to you, this is 12 verse 1. Therefore, I appeal to you, brothers, by the mercies of Yahweh, that you present your bodies as living sacrifices, holy and acceptable to Yahweh, which is your reasonable service. And do not be conformed to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may be able to test and prove what is the righteous and acceptable, and the perfect will of Yahweh. Now, the word transformed is also change, to change. Okay, so here's the teachings here saying, look, don't do what you were taught when you were a part of this world, but change. Okay, listen to the one sent and change the way that you think and act. Take on this righteous character so that you can be acceptable in the house of Yahweh. And this is the same thing that was taking place in Genesis. Okay, in Genesis chapter 4. Okay, now Abel, the scripture says that Abel presented his offering to Yahweh and it is acceptable, right? Now we just saw in the scriptures where it says that the priestly duty is to preach the message of Yahweh so that the people can be an acceptable offering to Yahweh. Okay, so this is what Abel was doing. Abel was preparing people at the house of Yahweh to be acceptable unto Yahweh. And Cain didn't do that. Cain's his offering wasn't acceptable. So obviously he wasn't teaching the way of Yahweh. And so when the correction came, when the chastening came, when Abel said to him, Cain, what you're doing isn't right. Okay? If you do righteousness, you will be accepted. You know what else he said to Cain? You need to ask at Abel. Okay? Ask at Abel, Cain. Praise Yahweh. You need to ask at Abel, and then you will learn what you need to do in order to be accepted by Yahweh. You can't do your own thing. Okay? Is this not the teaching of the house of Yahweh? Has it not been said, ask at Abel? Okay? It's always been the teaching. You have to ask at the house of Yahweh in order to be prepared to enter into the kingdom of Yahweh. Okay, but did Cain accept that correction? No. Not only did Cain murder his brother, he murdered a priest of Yahweh. Okay? He murdered a priest of Yahweh because he did not want to be corrected. Okay? Serious offense. Murder itself is serious, but he murdered his brother. He murdered a priest of Yahweh. Okay? Because he didn't want to change his life. Yahweh set certain judgments against Cain because of what he did. Cain became a fugitive and a vagabond. Okay? A fugitive is a person that's running from the law. Okay? A person that's running from the law. And this is what Cain did. He ran from the laws of Yahweh. He sought to establish his own righteousness, his own peace. A vagabond is someone that's always searching for something. And so before we came to the house of Yahweh, we were all fugitives and vagabonds, searching for peace, establishing our own righteousness, thinking we were going to get into the kingdom of Yahweh based on who we were, based on what we were taught, but we were wrong. Okay? Fugitives and vagabonds. Remember, Cain was always searching. The scripture says you are always learning, but never able to come to the full knowledge of the truth. What's the truth, great family of Yahweh? Laws of Yahweh. So you can't run from the laws of Yahweh and think that you're going to have peace. Okay, but this is what the whole world is doing right now, running from the laws of Yahweh, trying to establish their own peace. Great family, I want to encourage you to continue to put your trust in the great witness, continue to be focused on the things that we're learning, pay attention and understand all of the teachings so that we can have a place in Yahweh's eternal administration. May Yahweh bless your understanding. If you'll all please stand, I turn it over to the great God, Yisrayl Hawkins. Praise God.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. You may all be seated. Well, looking around in our world today, Matthew 24, I would keep rehearsing that scripture, that chapter, keep reading it, because we can see it coming to pass before our very eyes. It's how many ways could this world kill itself? And they're picking so many to choose from, so many ways to go. It starts off, of course, California. Pastor brought out last week how they're in drought, and they are still in drought. They're having floods, they're having mudslides, and they're still in drought. There is a destruction going on in that state with the rains that they're saying has never been seen before. Literally, when the rain comes, they need the rain, but the soil cannot handle it. It can't use it. It can't properly absorb it like it should be able to, and all of this is due to drought. So the very thing they need is helping to destroy the state itself. And then a very interesting article in RT this week on what's called the rusty-patched bumblebee. Now, this bumblebee is a pollinator, just like a honeybee, and they have now placed it on the endangered species list, but they're saying other bees are not far behind it, and they're warning how dangerous this actually is and how quickly the bee population is starting to fall apart. And notice they say, well, what's causing this? Do we really know? And of course, they have no answers, but the house of Yahweh knows. And then genetically modified corn. Very interesting coming out this week about Monsanto, how it's not just the corn, it's the cotton, the alfalfa, the sugar beets. They pretty much, any popular crop, they have got their chemical into it. And they're saying that this chemical, there's scientific studies proving that it causes liver disease, kidney disease, you're eating poison. And watch when the lady who's doing the interview asks and says, well, why doesn't this come out? Why are these studies not done more often? And the lady says, well, I'm amazed that this study comes out, but Monsanto is the largest contributor to the universities. And the universities are the one doing the studies. So they're being paid to not talk about it. But notice she says it's not just in the food, it's in the drinking water. Not just in the food, but in the drinking water. Be very thankful that we have what we have here, because she says one way to get around it is to eat organic. So we're very blessed to be here and have what we have. And then, of course, Mexico this last week, they're upset with the incoming government because they're being told they're going to have to pay $25 billion to build a wall. Keep in mind, this is not making friends. This is making more enemies. Then, of course, the largest NATO buildup in Poland in decades is taking place. there's a peace activist they're interviewing, and he talks and he says there is no peaceful solution being used in Europe. There is no peaceful solution being used in Europe. And of course, he says they need to disarm. They need to put these weapons down. And you can see with what this man's saying, Yahweh is slowly calling out this 2 billion people. They're ready to hear a message. They just don't have what it takes yet. That alarm hasn't went off, but there's plenty of people that they'll be there to teach if we train to teach them, and it will be there for us to do. And then the UN this week. Now this is very important because this is building up to the peace conference that's to take place tomorrow in Paris. The UN, of course, the new Secretary General is saying that we need to have less war. We need to have more peace. We need to usher in this peace. Now, he's not saying that you don't need to do what we tell you to do, because if you don't, we're going to go to war. By saying less war, it's saying people need to do what they're told to do quickly, and maybe we can force them through sanctions, but they're not going to stop war because they still have their agenda they're working toward. And remember, they're 1/4 of that quartet. Well, speaking of two others, the United States and also Russia, they're laying groundwork for war. And even they're saying the media is helping to lay this groundwork for war. And notice the one man as he's speaking, he says, listen, this is all about profit for military expenditures. They're making money off military weapons, and they're to the point now to make this money, they're ready and willing to go to war. It's not a problem. They're willing to do it. And once they make that commitment, you're just waiting for someone to actually push the button, so to speak, to get it going. And of course, NATO buildup creates World War III tensions in Poland. And one man, I think he says it best, the news reporter says, if you poke a dog enough, it's going to bite back. Do they not expect this dog, speaking of Russia, to bite back? They're going to bite back. And then Benjamin Netanyahu this week, concerning the peace conference in Paris, of course, he's not invited to that peace conference that's to take place tomorrow with 70 countries. He actually says that this peace conference is rigged. And I want to read to you something. You'll see the article, but I want to read to you what he's referring back to. It's very important. He says that it is a rigged conference rigged by the Palestinians. Netanyahu said in Jerusalem, this pushes peace backwards. It's not going to obligate us. Israel assisted on direct negotiations with the Palestinian Liberation Organization led by Mahmoud Abbas as required under the Oslo Accord signed in 1993. So it's amazing because now you have Netanyahu saying, well, no, we agreed in 1993 to do it this way. We don't need other people in this. We want to do it that way. Very interesting that he says that. But, of course, this morning, could you guess where Mahmoud Abbas was at? Yes, that's right. He's at the Vatican. This morning, the Palestinian Mahmoud Abbas warned Saturday that peace could suffer if the incoming Trump administration goes ahead with plans to move the U.S. Embassy to Israel, to move the U.S. Embassy to Israel from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. So they're talking about moving the embassy there. Palestine doesn't want it. And keep in mind that he added that if this decision to transfer the embassy to Jerusalem, it will not help peace, and we hope that it does not take place. Of course, the Vatican has long sought an international guarantee status for Jerusalem that safeguards its character, what it's known for. And of course, it was known for what they moved to Rome. But Abbas, remember, he told Pope Francis, our mission is the same, and of course, it's to get Jerusalem, it's to have Jerusalem. The Vatican recognized Palestine as a state, and in his closing comments, Mahmoud Abbas said that he hoped that other countries would follow the Vatican's example and also recognize Palestine as a state. That gives them negotiating power, and of course the UN has done so as we move forward. The UN has recognized them as a state. Last but not least, the Department of Defense, of course, there's a lot of new government officials coming up to take offices and a lot of depositions being given at this time before committees. And James Mattis, who is being considered for the Secretary of Defense, he is talking with John McCain. And if you'll watch what John McCain says, he asked him about this world order, this new world order that began after World War II, and he's referring to NATO. And he says that we need to put Russia down and China down if we need to keep this world order moving forward. And watch what the man who's a retired general, that he referred to him as Mad Dog, used to be his nickname, watch what he says, that we need to do so. If we could go ahead and please play the news at this time.
Pay close attention. What you're about to see is Bible prophecy being fulfilled.
Welcome to another edition of YPN News, bringing you news as it relates to Bible prophecy and foretold by Yisrayl Hawkins. Well, we've got more extreme weather in the forecast, so to speak, war games, and warnings of war from one nation to another. But we're going to first start off with the Sierra Nevada mountain range. A 400-mile range of mountains has received massive amounts of snow that has taken a little edge off the drought, but it hasn't gotten them out of the woods, and it's done this without first leaving slippery and impassable roads and fallen trees in its wake. And of course, more warm rain, it's on its way, bringing with it the potential of torrential flooding in the area.
Wow. Well, that flooding has already taken hold in some western states, along with high winds and mudslides in California and Nevada. Now, the governor of Nevada has declared a state of emergency, and 2 people have died as a result of flooding. In Reno, Nevada, over 1,000 homes have been evacuated as days of rain and snow made its way down the Truckee River. Now, people who were left behind spent their time stacking sandbags to try to protect their homes and businesses.
That's right. Throughout the region, heavy rains caused some drivers to become stranded. One 12-year-old girl was rescued from an overturned car, and a cab driver lost his life. Both vehicles ran off the road and became submerged in very frigid waters. Yosemite National Park was placed under mandatory evacuations, and Lake Tahoe residents cleared trees off roadways and filled sandbags to protect against the rising Yuba River.
Well, for the first time in history, the United States has added a bumblebee to the endangered species list. The rusty patch bumblebee has almost disappeared from the U.S. over the last 20 years, and 3 other bees could also soon be added to the list. Brigida Santos, an RT correspondent, said that according to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, the rusty patch bee population has declined 87% since the late 1990s. At one time, they could be found in about 28 states. Now they can only be found in 13.
Yeah, that's a huge decline. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service issued a statement saying, the species, now balancing precariously on the brink of extinction, has become the first ever bumblebee in the United States and the first bee of any kind in the contiguous 48 states to be declared endangered. Well, since the bees have been placed on the list of endangered species, resources can be allocated to save the dying population. Now, as a note, the bees are very important because, of course, they are pollinator bees, and they are responsible for pollinating 1/3 of the crops.
Well, Wildlife Service has estimated that they contribute $3 billion worth of pollination services in the U.S. alone. Now, scientists speculate overuse of pesticides and climate change are a cause of the decline. Now, the other 3 species of bees considered to be added to the list is the Franklin bumblebee, which may already be extinct, along with the western and the yellow bandit bumblebees. So 3 more that they may consider adding.
It's kind of scary to think about the fact that those insects that are responsible for pollinating the foods that we depend on are actually decreasing in numbers, which means food could possibly decrease as well.
And they do so much.
That's right. Well, corn and corn byproducts are consumed by hundreds of millions of people on a daily basis. Well, GMO corn has become increasingly more common, and GMO companies say it's equivalent in safety to non-GMO corn. But a new study published in Nature magazine by Dr. Michael Antonou is proving that to be false. Roundup Ready corn, NK603, a Monsanto product that's considered glyphosate resistant or tolerant, tests revealed that it was safe to consume and be served around the country. Again, those tests were performed by Monsanto.
Well, the new study finds that the test was ambiguous and not accurate. Dr. Antonu studied NK603 crops and non-GMO crops for 2 seasons. One batch of crops was treated with glyphosate and the other was not. Now, this was done to study genetic modification instead of the applied herbicide. Researchers found that the GMO corn had large amounts of toxic substances in them, which could escalate allergic reactions in those who have food allergies.
Scary. Experts say that in order to get the long-term effects of what GMO corn is doing to us, more independent studies need to be done. Now, Roundup Ready corn is a type of corn that's engineered by Monsanto to resist massive amounts of Roundup herbicide, which make Roundup the #1 chemical that we are exposed to as consumers, of course. Everything from cotton, corn, alfalfa, sugar beets, all of the top crops have been modified to have this herbicide-resistant trait.
In fact, food isn't the only thing to worry about. Even our drinking water has Roundup in it. In fact, rats fed Roundup Ready foods with 400,000 times less the amount what's allowable by regulators in our food. And Katan, this tiny little amount that the rats are fed is equivalent to what we get in our foods every day. They got this fatty liver disease, which correlates with liver and heart disease and diabetes, basically the chronic diet-related diseases that we have been plagued with, that Americans have been plagued with for many years now.
Yeah, that's been on the rise as well. Well, in fact, those studies were done by Monsanto themselves, and regulators could have stepped in at that time, but nothing was done. This was according to Alexis Bannon-Mayer, a political director for the Organic Consumers Association. One of the reasons that she said studies are hard to come by on these GMO crops is because Monsanto holds the patents, first off, to these crops. And, of course, Jeff, Monsanto is the largest funders of our university system here in the United States.
It's hard to think that it's not biased when they're the ones behind all the studies and giving all the money.
Yeah, well, a lot of people are asking questions now.
Yeah. Well, as a note, in case you're wondering, corn is in virtually everything we eat, from multi-ingredient foods to meats. So in order to ensure some level of safety for you and your family, you have to look for non-GMO project verified or organic foods.
Well, the incoming president is also proposing to modify along the U.S. border. Of course, our chief correspondent, Larry McGee, has been following that story as well as several others for us. Larry, what do you have?
Tensions haven't eased between President-elect Donald Trump and President Nieto of Mexico concerning a proposal that the Mexican government should fund the construction of a wall along the U.S.-Mexican border. The Mexican head has stated that Mexico will not pay the estimated $25 billion in construction costs and has countered that the U.S. should improve on efforts to prevent illegal gun trafficking into Mexico. Not just guns, but soldiers and hundreds of military vehicles are arriving in Poland for mass NATO war games. The gathering is a part of Operation Atlantic Resolve and is being called the largest in Europe in decades. U.S. Army General Christopher Norrie says they have an incredibly lethal large Army Brigade combat team, and their purpose is to add to an already incredibly strong deterrent capability in Eastern Europe. The exercises also included more than several nations that are also said to be surrounding Russia along its western border, including Bulgaria, Romania, Hungary, and Estonia. The operation was reportedly announced by the U.S. in response to concerns voiced by the Baltic states regarding Russian aggression, but some European nations see the move as dangerously provocative and are reportedly angered by the maneuvers that are slated to be conducted for 9 months along the Russian border. With the largest deployment since World War II, Cold War mindsets, and nuclear weapons all being a part of the equation, many European citizens are understandably alarmed with the result that protests have ignited across the continent. Rainer Braun of Germany's peace movement says the issue is that the people of Europe would rather have peaceful relations with Russia in a climate of cooperation, trade, exchange of opinion, and common activities. What they don't want, he says, is war, and the circumstances that they believe have come as a result of NATO being aggressively redirected towards Russia over the last 20 years. On the question of Russian aggression itself, Braun says the Crimea issue and the Ukraine issue has responsibility on many sides. It's impossible, he stated, to accuse one side. What is needed, he believes, is cooperation on both sides. And he maintains that NATO's response has nothing to do with the peaceful solution in Europe. His call is for disarmament, reduction of military troops on the Russian-NATO border, a decrease in nuclear weapons, and an abandonment of mass military structures on both sides. He sees the matter potentially escalating into a world war that could ultimately include nuclear weapons. The representative, who was issuing comments after having attended UN meetings in New York, stated with some considerable anxiety that what he found unpleasant is that from what he was able to gather from the hearings, it is pretty much clear that the same politics will continue under the incoming president. Reiner isn't the only one upset with the UN and vain politics. The new UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, has been vocal as of late concerning what he perceives as a failure on behalf of the United Nations to prevent wars and conflicts across the globe. The UN had stated that the United Nations was established to prevent war by binding nations in a rules-based international order. Today, he says that order is under grave stress. The cause of crises, he stated, are interlinked, and the UN's response has remained fragmented. All of this was contributed during Mr. Guterres' first address to the UN Security Council since taking office this month. The leader believes the governing body is in need of an overhaul in regards to its approach to preventing wars, and he has pledged to strengthen the UN's ability to mediate conflicts with the ultimate goal of preventing them as opposed to merely responding to them. The urgent comes at a time when the Security Council is deadlocked over several major crises in nations such as Syria, Burundi, and South Sudan. The former refugee chief believes the organization has lost too many opportunities to prevent conflicts due to mistrust among states. For IPN News, I'm Larry McGee. Katan Jeff, back to you.
Well, regarding that wall there, Jeff, it's interesting because the Mexican president is saying, no way, we're not paying for a wall. And of course, the incoming president-elect Trump is saying, we're going to have you foot the bill. So I guess we'll see how things take place in the next coming months.
All right. Well, earlier this week, RT asked author and activist David Swanson why the claims of alleged Russian hacking got so much attention in the mainstream media despite the lack of concrete proof or any evidence at all. Mr. Swanson responded, I think the desire for an explanation for how Trump became president that doesn't blame the Democratic Party or the establishment as a whole. I think the fear and demonization of a foreign target, in this case, Vladimir Putin, as xenophobia. And of course, xenophobia, Katan, is that fear or hatred for strangers or foreigners or anything that's stranger foreign. So they're trying to demonize, their words, Russia and people. Vladimir Putin.
Interesting. Well, Swanson also commented on the recent U.S. moves, including the troop buildup near Russia and the potential for war. He said, clearly combined with the shipment of troops and tanks to Poland and other countries on the border of Russia and the missile base in Romania and under construction in Poland. I think it's all a part of a package aimed almost openly at profits for weapons profiteers. Well, this is what it's about. Some of these people are willing, he said, to risk nuclear war.
Wow, now that's a scary thought.
It really is, very scary.
Well, Russia is not the only country that the United States has managed to irritate lately. China has also expressed its frustrations with recent comments made by Secretary of State nominee Rex Tillerson over the Chinese man-made islands in the South China Sea. Now, at his confirmation hearing, Tillerson said, we're going to have to send China a clear signal that first, the island building stops, And second, your access to those islands is also not going to be allowed.
Ooh, sounds almost like fighting words right there. Well, the Chinese has fired back as a government-run Chinese newspaper and now warning of a possible war with the U.S. over the man-made islands. The Chinese newspaper Global Times said, quote, unless Washington plans to wage a large-scale war in the South China Sea, then trying to block China's access to the islands would be, quote, foolish. This is what the Chinese are saying. The article continued saying Tillerson had better bone up on nuclear power strategies if he wants to force a big nuclear power, referring to China itself, to withdraw from its own territories.
Well, how could the U.S. deny China access to those islands? Gregory Poling with the Center of Strategic and International Studies explained to CNN that the U.S. would have to start with a naval blockade. But that wouldn't be all, as China has air capabilities as well. And with 4 different airstrips and enough hangar space for a full line of fighter aircraft, they would have to consider China's Air Force. And this is out there on those man-made islands. They're pretty built up right now.
Yeah, we reported on that not too long ago. However, that's not all. Satellite imagery shows these islands are equipped with advanced air defense and anti-missile systems, as well as anti-aircraft guns. Since these statements from China were made, Pentagon officials have been calling on China to reduce tensions. Analysts are also worried about escalation, with the biggest fear being an accidental conflict.
Well, with all the world powers being under such tense relations these days, there are many people in Europe worried and even fearful that we are facing World War III. But what is the cause for all the tension? Well, one former U.S. State Department official, Matthew Howe, told RT in an interview the answer is American politics.
Mr. Howe resigned from his post as the State Department at the State Department, in protest over U.S. strategic policy and goals in Afghanistan in September of 2009. He is currently a senior fellow at the Center for International Policy and promotes Veterans for Peace, an international group whose mission is to build a culture of peace through awareness and education. The group informs the public of the true cause of war and the enormous cost of wars.
Well, when asked why World War III seems to be looming on the horizon, Howe quickly stated the desire for politicians in the United States to have this enemy, Russia, again. And this comes from a variety of factors. This comes from our excessive military budget. We spend more, he said, on the United States military than the next 10 countries in the world combined. We have troops in about 130 countries around the world, and we have 800 bases overseas.
Oh, that's amazing. Howe pointed out that making this enemy out of Russia is just another way of breeding fear in society and making them feel there is a need for a strong military presence overseas. But as RT News anchor Kevin Owen pointed out, you can only poke the dog so often, and it's going to snap back at some point.
And that's what everybody's worried about, this some type of accident taking place or somebody saying the wrong thing, and before you know it, all-out war.
That's right.
Well, Howe explained the focus of the United States government isn't on the ultimate end result of an all-out war. He said it's about keeping the status quo going. Keep the empire alight, he said. You've got to justify these $600 to $700 billion a year defense budgets in the United States. You got to have the Democrats looking as tough as Republicans on foreign policy.
On, he continued, you've got to distract the American people from all the problems we have here at home in the United States. And so, time and again, go through the history of the world. The best way for a government to keep its people focused on something rather than its own problems is to create an enemy abroad.
Well, no doubt Benjamin Netanyahu doesn't have very far to go to find his enemies. The Israeli Prime Minister recently condemned the peace conference to be held on January 15th in Paris. Netanyahu told the press there are other such efforts that render peace hopeless, and one of them is the Paris conference. It's a rigged conference, he said, rigged by the Palestinians with French auspices to adopt international anti-Israel stances.
Interesting. According to Reuters, the objective of the conference is to reaffirm the international community's collective commitment to a two-state settlement of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Netanyahu was adamant the conference would only make things worse, saying, "This pushes peace backwards. It's not going to obligate us. It's a relic of the past. It's last gasp of the past before the future sets in." And of course, future he's also talking about is reference to the President-elect of the United States, Donald Trump.
Well, our final report takes us to the confirmation hearing for James Mattis. Now, last week he testified before the Senate Armed Services Committee to become the new Defense Secretary under President-elect Donald Trump. In this clip from the hearing, the chairman, Senator John McCain, questioned Mattis to see what his position was concerning the current relationships with President Putin, Russia as a whole, and the Chinese government. Let's take a listen.
I've watched three presidents commit themselves to a new relationship with Vladimir Putin. All three have been an abysmal failure. Should we ignore the lessons of history in our relationship with Vladimir Putin, and what should we be doing?
Chairman, history is not a straitjacket, but I've never found a better guide for the way ahead than studying the history. Since Yalta, we have a long list of times that we've tried to engage positively with Russia. We have a relatively short list of successes in that regard. And I think right now the most important thing is that we recognize the reality of what we deal with Mr. Putin, and we recognize that he is trying to break the North Atlantic Alliance, and we recognize that he is trying to break the North Atlantic Alliance, and we recognize that he is trying to break the North Atlantic Alliance, and that we take the steps, the integrated steps, diplomatic, economic, military, and the alliance steps, the working with our allies to defend ourselves where we must.
As we are all aware that following World War II, a world order was established. A world order was established. A world order was established, which has held for basically the last 70 years. Held for basically the last 70 years. A world order was established. Held for basically the last 70 years. Do you believe that world order is now under more strain than it's ever been?
I think it's under the biggest attack since World War II, sir, and that's from Russia, from terrorist groups, and with what China is doing in the South China Sea.
Well, I guess they want somebody in there that's definitely going to be along their line of thinking.
That's right.
Well, certain leaders of this world have been pushing this new world order for quite some time. What they fail to see is that in nuclear war, there are no winners. Now, the nations are angry and on the brink of war. One wrong move or one slip-up could erupt into an all-out nuclear war. And as war plans are being drawn up and heated words exchanged, Yisrayl Hawkins and a dedicated group of workers are publishing plans for peace and words of kindness that have the ability to change the hearts and minds. Well, plan for your future by getting involved today. Contact the House of Yahweh, and when you do, don't forget to request your free Prophetic Word magazine and monthly newsletter. Here's how.
You can contact the House of Yahweh by writing them at the House of Yahweh, P.O. Box 2498, Abilene, Texas 79604, or call them at 1-800-613-9494, or visit them on any of their websites at www.yahweh.com, www.yisraelhawkins.com, www.yahwehsbranch.com. You can also visit us on our website at www.ypnnews.com. You can also email the House of Yahweh at info@yahweh.com. And for all calls outside the United States, please dial the number on your screen. And don't forget about the best study resource to the Holy Scriptures, the Yisrael Says program, which can be found at www.yisraelsays.com.
Well, get ready to stand and cheer. Up next is Yisrayl Hawkins. For all of us here at YPN News, I'm Jeffrey Heimerman.
And I'm Katan Alexander.
Thanks for watching.
At this time, if everyone would please stand, I would like to introduce the greatest teacher in the world, the great Gahan Yisrayl Hawkins.
Shalom, everyone. Hey, you didn't let the rain stop you. They're here, Yahweh. Praise Yahweh. You may be seated. May the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. What we're seeing here, if I can talk and take care of my record book here too, my file cabinet, what we're seeing in this news right now and what is taking place in the world, number one, we're seeing the international community that is up in arms about the refugees, the people they're killing, homeless children, and it's what they're seeing sin bring. It's really making them sick now to watch it. and this is great. Now Israel, if you notice, they stopped the news media from their work. They can't broadcast anything that's taking place in Israel now. And of course, some of the writers here are getting the information on it, and they're writing about it. Let me see if I can find that. Here we go. I need to advertise sleeping bags. That was a note I was hunting. Everyone needs to think about getting you some sleeping bags if you don't have anything that you could stay comfortable in at about 20 to 30 degrees below. You might think about getting you some sleeping bags. They're comfortable. You can zip them up. You can get a blanket to go inside of them. It makes it come down about 10 or 15 more degrees and keep you warm. The resolution 2334, I wanted to get work several weeks ago on this, but somehow or another it got lost or pushed aside, but I got everyone back to working on it again, and you might write this down, this number. Anytime you see 34, you can almost rest assured it's talking about our generation. And even if it's got numbers in front of it, you need, I told the elders this morning, they need to divide these two. Look up 2334, yes, in Strong's. But divide them, 23 and 34. You'll see both of them are talking about the same thing. This number 23, it actually means father of gathering. What you're going to see in what I want to show you in pictures this morning, and much more is going to be brought on it either next Sabbath or the Sabbath after that, depending on what I can cover today. But I have others that are working on these, and I'd like for everyone to. But it actually, this 23 means father of gathering, which I hope to get into in the scriptures. Prophecy is my thing, and I want others to bring forth the numbers and the meaning of them. That's necessary too, because it gives some details of these prophecies. This number 23, it means father, as does 2334. The 23 means father of gathering. It comes from number 1 and number 622. Number 1 means father. Number 2 means gathering. And if you tie that gathering, remember these words, and tie them, it should make you think of scriptures. gathering, you should automatically think of the great gathering that Yahweh's that is taking place right now, due to satellites. Satellites. That was invented, by the way, in 1934. The telephone. Now, last week, I'm standing here in Texas, and I told a certain person, get me something. I'm going to tell her again right now, get me an update, Rebecca. Now, I want you to get this and understand it, because this is what Yahweh has the technology of. I'm standing here in Texas. They're watching me 3 or 4 states from here and taking an order from me. Isn't that amazing? Well, of course, you understand it because you were brought up with it. They didn't have it when I was born, but they started the inventions at that time with the increase in knowledge that Yahweh himself had predicted. Get what a miracle that is. It wasn't made in 1934. We didn't have televisions, telephones. We didn't even have running water, except the water that we ran to get, of course, out of a well. But in 34, all of this started. They got the knowledge, and they started bringing forth these products in 1934. Television, yes, that was, and the gematria for, I call it gematria because I'm from Oklahoma. I pronounce my A's. Other peoples make an O out of A. That's the reason I say gematria. They say gematria. Well, there's songs to that. The person that wrote the song about that was from Oklahoma, by the way. Some say potato, others say potato. Remember that song, anyone? No, am I know the only one? Oh, okay. Anyway, the gematria is very important for this, and it gives you the number and the meanings of these statements. And I gave a list of them to people to start getting them, and some of them have come back. One of them is a satellite, the other telephones, television. All of that came forth in 1934. We have it's a matter of history. Now, this gathering together, that is Yahweh's gathering, it means to restore, together, to assemble, like we're assembled here today. Then it has the word reward, meaning that the rewards was shut off, and now they're coming again. The prophet Jeremiah used that in a different way, and Zechariah also, and says before those days it was sealed, it was shut off, book of Yahweh disappeared for 1,500 years. But now it means reward. In other words, Yahweh the Father is bringing it back. Gather, praise Yahweh. Thank you. Reward, gather food, as did Noah. We're gathering food. Know anyone that's doing that? I know some Kenners they'd certainly tell you about it. Genesis 6:21, when he told Noah, put back some food, you're going to need it. This 2334 also refers you to one of the numbers before I run out of ink in my copier this morning. And all this will be got and organized and brought to you very soon. But it refers you to 2421. And that one goes from 2331 to 2421. And it means to live. To live. Now, it's talking about a resurrection. So in a time period now where Yahweh is going to resurrect the dead. To live, whether literally or figuratively, calls to revive, to keep alive, leave, make alive, certainly, give, promise, life. Live, nourish up, preserve, alive, and he uses the word quicken, and then recover, repair, restore to life, revive. Yahweh save, alive, life, lives, surely be whole. That's not all of it, but that's enough to show you that these numbers that we're giving certainly indicate the same and tie in with the prophecies that I want to show you today. The 2334 comes from 2333. 34 is the year I was born. 33 is the year I was conceived. And that's when the work, when I was conceived or born, that's when the work, the last days prophesied work of Yahshua tying the donkeys to the branch. That's when it started. 2334. That 2334, it's from 2333 and 3265. It means, and get this, a region in Palestine. We got trouble going on right now in that region. And of course, the quartet is fully involved in this trouble. And Israel insists on direct negotiations with the Palestinian Liberation Organization. Netanyahu is angry about it. PLO led by Abbas, as required under the Oslo Accord. Now, he's read this, and this is what I said years ago when he shut it down himself. Netanyahu was the one that stopped this 7-year peace agreement that was signed by Rabin. When Rabin signed it, he's the prime minister, of course, but it's much like in America where Barack Obama has worked for 8 years to bring forth different things in the United States and the countries abroad. And the next president now, before he becomes president, he's already threatening to nullify most of the stuff that Barack Obama made law. Well, you see this with Netanyahu, even though their elected official, Rabin, spoken of in Scripture, signed the 7-year peace agreement. The next prime minister comes in and says, I'm going to shut it down. It's detrimental to Israel. I'm going to shut it down, nullify it, which he did. So he stopped this divided time that the Scripture speaks of. Well, I explained to you now that this 7-year agreement was a 7 years of activities. When the activity stops, which is what Netanyahu did. Netanyahu stopped the 7-year agreement in the midst, as the Scripture said. Actually pointed that out in the book, The Mark of the Beast, and the book, The Nuclear Baby. I was told that in this telecommunication that I now have the answer to. It was brought up here to me a while ago. This started off with 69,000 this morning, newspapers running this article of ours. it's up to 74,454. Now that was just about 2 hours doing, but you got the idea too that when Daniel talked to me, when Yochanan, the one that copied the book that I taught him long before I was born, but Yahweh had this telecommunication down pat, and that was what he was using. Of course, he don't have to have it. He don't have to have it wired to phone lines or electric currents or whatever. It's all there for him in microorganisms, and all he has to do is tell them or design them to do this, follow this plan. And he has this sea of glass that he's seeing, sending out messages, even in the clouds. That's what Yahshua has written us many messages, and he told us, watch the clouds. I'm going to be sending messages to you. And he is. Well, the quartet now and all these nations said, we're going to stop Israel from killing all these people because the international community is in an uproar about it. So they voted 14-0, all of them unanimously. Now this is your United Nations that we put in office to unite the nations and to bring peace between all nations. So Netanyahu says, I'm not going to do it. This is not just one nation. So they are saying, well, if you don't, we're going to start taking your money. First off, the United States is giving you, I think it's $3 billion annually. That's going to stop. Many more. Canada, I think, is giving almost that much. But all that money that's being sent to Israel for military purposes is going to stop, they say. That's how they're going to enforce this law, is to bring sanctions against Israel. And this is what we're seeing in prophecy, and this is what we see taking place right now. But the Oslo Accord was mentioned here, led by Hamas, as required under Oslo Accord. That's what it's called, signed in 1993. That was what he signed. Rabin signed with Clinton and Arafat, those three. And this is what we brought out in the book in the 70s, 76, I believe, when I wrote Mark of the Beast, and I laid out this plan of the 7 years, 7-year peace plan. But it wasn't signed until 1993. It looks like anyone would believe the scriptures after that is brought forth. These numbers, I've got a whole big list of them here that I had people get the gematria on, but I can't cover it. I'm gonna go into the scriptures and show you that first, because I'm gonna run out of time here if I don't. The our work, Yisrayl Hawkins Association. Yisrayl Hawkins refutes accusations and proclaims message of peace in new posts this week. Now that was up to 69,000. It's now up to 74,000 readers right now. The other one is up to 87,220,518. It's tops on Google, so it's getting out there pretty well right now, this message that the Vatican hates, and they're refuting it. Now, the article here says, why Netanyahu is upset about UN Security Council Resolution 2334. That's the number, 2334. I just read you some of it. There's a bunch more besides that. Probably an hour or two of understanding, and probably less than that if you truly want to understand. But if you don't know how to look up the gematria, we have teachers that can certainly teach you how to do it. Members of the world community finally reached a limit. This is what I was telling you. They're getting upset. And they're saying, we want it stopped, and it's got to stop now. Now, these are the people with the money who Malachi Martin says they have the money. They can do what they want to with it. They can say when a nation, what nation stands and what nation falls. Well, the members of the world community finally reached a limit, witnessing Israel's treatment of Palestinians. The United Nations Security Council presented a peace offering to Palestinians days before the official birthday of Jesus in what is now occupied Bethlehem. I remember that Bethlehem when I think it was the last time we were there, and we saw the Palestinians and talked to them. They were wanting to build a mosque there, and here's the Catholic Church sitting on the 7 hills of Rome said no. Remember that? Said no, and of course they were trying to get our support, and we talked to them, I guess, for an hour or two, and I tried to tell them where it would all end, but I don't know if they remembered that 5 minutes after we left or not. But this resolution 2334, with a vision of a region where 2 democratic states, Israel and Palestine, live together side by side in peace within secure and recognized borders. Ironically, the seemingly toothless resolution's main nothingty comes from Netanyahu's fury at its passage. The resolution, which aims to bring lasting peace, now that's what the Scripture says they'll call it. 2 Thessalonians, peace, true peace, means lasting peace, to Israelites and Palestinians based on international law. International law that's denied that by Netanyahu right now. He denied it to begin with because the treaty they signed was legal. And this is what the Catholic Church keeps coming back at Israel about and advertising it, that this was a legally signed document that can't be broken. Well, they're breaking it. The international law comes at a time when Israel seems to be in the mop-up phase of its theft of Palestinian resources, such as water, oil, and gas, and its annexation or whatever it wanted of the Palestinian territories it has occupied since 1967, East Jerusalem, the West Bank, and Gaza. I don't know how many of you remember that war in 1967. I remember it, and I remember Jacob and myself talking about the scriptures that applied to this, and then and of course the scriptures that applied to it is just exactly what we're seeing today. The resolution 2334 says, out of Security Council's intention to start diplomatic meetings to create lasting peace based on the relevant United Nations resolution and other peace agreements and initiatives. So they're adding to it as they go now. Don't miss that. Israel to immediately and completely cease all settlement activities, which they say already they're not going to, in the occupied Palestinian territories, including East Jerusalem, because of their illegality, the international community to recognize the difference in the dealings between Israel and the occupied Palestinian territories, immediate steps to prevent all violence against civilians, including acts of terror, as well as acts of provocation and destruction, calls for accountability in this regard, so they can sue that person, file charges, like they did against Pope Benedict. They filed charges against him. He's under house arrest. If he ever leaves the Vatican now, or his hole in the wall there, they can arrest him. That's the reason Pope Francis can't take office. Both parties to act on the basis of international law, including international humanitarian law. Efforts aimed at achieving without delay a comprehensive, just, and lasting peace in the Middle East. They keep saying it over and over, get that. If Israel refuses to abide by resolutions called to end all settlement activity, the Palestinians can pursue cases against Israel's leaders at the International Criminal Court. This could go on for years, you understand, this till the next president comes that wipes it all out. By calling for an international community to differentiate between Israel and the occupied Palestinian territories in its dealings, the UN is calling for an end to trade agreements, to stop the trade agreements where this will hurt Israel financially, the end of these trade agreements, such as Canada's that support the financial viability of the settlements by allowing Israel to mislabel products produced in the settlements as from Israel in order to facilitate sales and avoid duties. So in the way it's going down, you can see that there's theft of duties, and Canada now, who also gives money to Israel, they are breaking their own laws and the laws in Israel, plus the laws of the international community that pass these laws to keep certain things under control. The call for both parties to act on the basis of international humanitarian law is a demand that Israel, as an occupying power, respect the Fourth Geneva Convention, the law governing the treatment of civilians under military occupation. Remember the tempers, the breaking of the laws, the rejection of the law after it's passed. That's the same thing that the Catholic Church is saying and has said all along. You know, you can't break these international laws, but they still break them, even though the majority of the people, democracy, brings this about. There are laws that you can't deal with in this way. Yahweh's laws, everyone can agree with Yahweh's laws because there's nothing unjust about his laws. But they push all of this aside, see, and they pass their own laws, and the laws that they pass forbids theft. That's the reason they don't want Yahweh's laws to begin with. Theft and fraud that is taking place in Israel right now by the leaders themselves. Now, if this was an individual that was stealing and they caught him, they'd put him in prison till he died. But the top men, the prime minister, the president, the individuals in Canada who have money galore are stealing or helping, being a party to theft in Israel. U.S. abstains as UN Security Council vote 14-0 against Israel, Israeli settlements. The U.S. action just weeks before Obama ends 8 years as president broke with the long-standing American approach and shielding Israel, which receives more than $3 billion annually U.S. military aid from such action. You get that? $3 billion from the United States tax dollars. Now, all of this is shown in Scripture and on this sea of glass that Yahweh is setting before Yahweh right now. It's necessary to understand this, the television, the telephone, everything that Yahweh gave us in this time period, telling the television. This is gematria of this. Television is 828. 828, that's my birthday. And Yahweh, if you'll see this, you'll see that He's tied everything here together for you on this sea of glass that I'm trying to present to you in words. And of course, the actions. You saw how fast this came from 3 or 4 states away, and it came almost instantly. And all I had to do is just say the word, and here it is. Well, that's the same thing now that Yahweh has here. All was sealed. All of this was sealed up. The scriptures were sealed. In fact, they were taken away. And we see this in Daniel 12:4. Let's get that. Daniel 12:4. Now remember all this other that I just brought you now. And here is Daniel now that's asking what's going to be in the end. And because Yahweh had painted him a picture of what was taking place in chapter 9 with Yada, who holds the scepter as lawgiver. It's not Netanyahu, but it's Rome. And this is what Malachi Martin brought out in his book. So I know that they know about these scriptures. For Malachi Martin to have written that book, surely he wasn't the only one that knew this. Well, here in chapter 12 of Daniel, he shows here this great time of trouble. Verse 2 also shows the resurrection of the dead and those who are teachers of righteousness. Verse 3, he shows all of this, and then Yahweh tells him to shut the book. In verse 4, he says, "You, Daniel, shut up the words and seal the book. To the time of the end, many will run to and fro, and knowledge will increase until," notice that, until the time of the end. To the time of the end. Shut it up and seal it to the time of the end. And then he shows you the time of the end. You see that? Shut the words up, shut them up, seal them. There's going to be no understanding now from now on until the time of the end. That's when you'll understand the time of the end. In the time of the end. Then verse 5, he shows he says, I looked and saw 2 others. So all was sealed until the time of the 2 others. The time of the 2 others. You see that? It was sealed until the 2 others. Then, by the prophesied 2 others, then by the prophesied 2 others, it would be revealed. The time of the end would be revealed. Now go quickly with that in your mind. Revelations 1. Revelations 1. Remember, it was sealed until. And then it was revealed. Reveal means revelation. Reveal, the revealing is revelations. Sealed until the time of the end. And then I looked and I saw these 2 others in this telecommunication that we have today. Telephone. And lo and behold, the gematria of television, television, means to tell about a vision or tell a vision. And the number is 828. The gematria of that is 828. Now look at Revelations 1. The revelation of Yahshua Messiah. So we had to have a Savior between Daniel and this book right here. We had to have a revelator, and he had to be high priest for Yahweh, because Yahweh gave this directly to the high priest. That's how the law was set up under Moshe. Moshe received it, and he gave it to the people. So Yahweh gives this to Yahshua, which is now high priest, as Hebrews 4. Can y'all hear me? Hebrews 4? Is that when he said he is high priest over the house? When was it? Where was it? 10. Hebrews 10:21. Right? Okay, the revelation of Yahshua, which Yahweh gave to him, to show his servants, that's Yahweh's servants, things which must shortly come to pass. The end, things that must come to pass. It wasn't shown except in this book right here. Must shortly come to pass in the time of the 2 others. In the time of the 2 others, get this, don't miss it. It must come to pass in the time of the 2 others, which we see in Revelations 11. Hold your place right there and look on over to Revelations 11 and verse 3 for the 2 others. Now remember, it's all shut up, it's sealed. Close up the book, and then Yahweh showed him when the time of the end with 2 others. Revelations 1 shows you things which must come to pass. Which must come to pass by those 2 others. Revelations 11, verse 3. And I will give to my 2 witnesses. I, Yahweh, will give to my 2 witnesses, or I, Yahshua, who is high priest, the high priest that Yahweh uses, will give to my 2 witnesses to perform their prophetic office, their prophesied office, meaning this is prophesied somewhere in the Scriptures. You see that? Their prophesied office. So it's prophesied by Daniel, It's also prophesied by several other prophets. And they will foretell. Remember all these other scriptures now. I'll quote them right quick. But Isaiah 44:8 says, let them foretell them. Who will foretell these? Let them, the two brothers, Yisrayl and Yaakov, the two houses of Yahweh, seen in Zechariah 5 and 6. Let them foretell, I will give to them. Yahweh says, I will give to my two witnesses. I will give to my two witnesses to perform their prophesied office, and they will foretell. They will foretell. You get that? They will foretell. Not somebody else, but they. They will foretell, if you add the rest of the prophecies, from the house of Yahweh. They will foretell from the house of Yahweh, going out to all the world. But they will foretell events about the 3.5 years. This 3.5 years of the Oslo Accord they're trying to open up right now. That's what they're trying to do. And they're telling, this is what Netanyahu shut down before. He said, no, this is going to stop Israel from growing. It's going to be detrimental to everything we do. But they're saying, you're going to stop it. We're going to put this Oslo Accord back into action. The Vatican has been trying for years to get this back into action and has not succeeded. But they kept hunting and looking at this door and that door and so forth. And finally, they've come up now with enough agreement with the UN and, of course, the international community putting some leverage against it because they're sick and tired of watching all these people being bombed and killed, dying. Yes, it was prophesied. We told it before it ever started taking place. But these days, 3.5 years, those cast about with darkness. That is the time also when the sun is darkened. These are the two olive trees, it says, that Daniel saw there now. Verse 3, go back to Revelations 1 there. Revelations 1 and verse 3, blessed is he who reads. That's one. Blessed is he who reads. That also means to explain and teach and so forth. Those who hear and make notes and listen to every word that he says. The words of this prophecy of the two witnesses shown in Revelations 11. The words of this prophecy. And also keeps those things which are written in it, for the time is at hand. This time, not in Daniel's day. Daniel, 1,500 years after that, was still waiting on the book of Yahweh. He would have been if he was still alive. This prophesied for this time period of Revelations 11. Now that should be plain enough, I would think, I hope. That seeing and telling, this is a time when we can forecast this to all the world. I can speak here, be heard clear around the world right now. They can pick this up right now. The gematria for that great knowledge increase and that great invention is 828. 828. The birthday, my birthday, 828. Look that up, if you will. Prove it to yourself. And I will give to my two witnesses, he said, this blessing. And Revelations 3, blessed is he who reads, blessed is he who hears, blessed are those who keep and obey. Revelations 1:1 of that short or shortened time. Notice that. This short or shortened time. It must come to pass in that shortened time. If you remember Matthew 24, that's the words of the Savior too. Turn there quickly. Matthew 24. Matthew 24, verse 21. And then will be great tribulation, such as never has come to pass since the beginning of the world to this time. That's the same thing Daniel said in chapter 12, verse 1. No, nor ever will be. That's chapter Matthew 24, Matthew 24, 21. And then he says, unless those days were shortened. And that word in Revelations 1:1 there can also mean that same thing, those days shortened. The time. The time when Yahshua sent and signified made it important. It made it important to you. It's very important that you understand this. And understand that this sea of glass that Yahweh is watching, he's aware of it all the time. The 7-lamp lampstand, the work that we're doing, it's all being shown right there like a big television screen. And of course played out for heaven and earth to see. To those hearing, he said, hearing Yahshua's messenger, Yahshua's messenger. He gives it to his messenger. Well, we know his messenger is the branch, and of course the donkeys. Let's read that. Get this in your mind. Genesis 49. Genesis 49 and verse 10. Speaking of the end now, and Yahshua says, I'll give to my 2 witnesses. Yahweh said, then I'll give to my 2 witnesses. Yahshua said, I'll send my messenger to tell about these things in the congregation. Tell these prophecies. Well, here we see now the last days in verse 1, Genesis 49, verse 1. Then in verse 10, the scepter will not depart from Yada. Yada was the heads of Jacob who hate righteousness. Remember Micah 3 and verse 1. The scepter will not depart from him, nor a ruling staff from between his feet until. Now he gives you that word until. Then he tells you this is as far as it's going to go. And trust, this is as far as it's going to go. He's got it set time, until he comes to whom tribute belongs, and the obedience, notice, the obedience of the nations is here. The obedience. Thithering his donkey, here's the way it comes about, thithering his donkey to the vine. Yahshua said, I am the vine, you're the branches. Thithering his donkey to the vine, Yahshua, his donkey colt. The donkeys, the 12 disciples Yahshua laid the foundation for the house of Yahweh through his 12 disciples. The donkey's colt has that foundation, and they're tied to the choice branch. So here we have the vine and the branch that is mentioned in these scriptures. He will wash his garments and so forth. In Matthew now, 24, and look at verse 14, Matthew 24, and this is the time period now when he has his donkey colt, that's us, tied to the branch, that's us, tied to the branch, doing this work, and you are going to see the obedience of the nations turn to you. And I hope to show you that before this sermon's out. 24, look at 14, and this message of the kingdom will be preached to all the world by the one who bears witness to all nations, and then the end will come. The end. Now look at verse 31. And he will send his Malachim, with a great sound of a trumpet. The other elders spoke of that this morning, did a fine job too. Great sound of a trumpet, and they will gather. Here you have the gathering. Remember that number. It means gathering, the gathering. So there's a gathering, an assembly, and it takes place. That number verifies the prophecy and has nothing to do with the words in the scriptures, but it verifies it, showing that this great gathering you're seeing right now, both Yahweh and this gathering that is going to be destroyed, both gatherings take place at the same time. But he sends his messenger, verse 14, the Malachim, that's the donkey's colts, with a great trumpet, and they will gather together his elect from the four winds. Four winds? Four winds. Well, let's go over to keep that in mind. Let's go back to Jeremiah now. Jeremiah 23. Jeremiah 23. Found on page 591. These pastors that he's talking about here in verse 1, Jeremiah 23 and verse 1, woe to the pastors who destroy and scatter. And of course, that's what you're seeing right now. You're seeing the world leaders, the people can't stand them. They fight against each other. They criticize each other. They lay traps for each other. If you want to know how bad that guy is, ask his enemy. Well, woe to the pastor that destroy and scatter my sheep. So this is taking place from the kings when they say we want a king to do our fighting for us instead of Yahweh. That way we can be as evil as we want to, and we can let our kings do our battles. We can cause as many battles as we want to with our sinful activities, and we'll let our kings settle them. Well, therefore, verse 2, therefore this is what Yahweh says of Israel, Father of Israel, says, against the pastors who feed my people, you have scattered my flock and driven them away. Now notice verse 3. Verse 3, he says, but I will gather the remnant of my flock out of all countries. That's the great gathering that's taking place on the side that Yahweh's doing. Verse 4, I will set up shepherds over them. Verse 5, behold, the days come, says Yahweh. This day is coming. That's what he told Daniel when he showed him two others in Daniel 12:4. Then he showed it again in Revelations. Behold, the days coming, says Yahweh, that I will raise to David a righteous branch. Remember Genesis 49:10, thither the donkey's colt to the branch. Thither the donkeys to Yahshua the vine, then the donkey's colt in the last days when the obedience of the nations takes place to the branch. David, a righteous branch, and a king will reign. Yes, a king, as Zechariah shows, that he's crowned king, will reign and succeed and will execute judgment and justice in the earth. That's going to take place with the branch. Yeshua's high priest, the donkey is tied to the branch. You see that? This is going to become about. It's going to take place among the nations, because the nations eventually, as I'll show you in Revelations, is actually going to submit. They're going to be obedient to you. In his day, Yada will be saved, and Israel will dwell safely, and this is the name that he will proclaim to them. Yahweh our righteousness. Now we're facing nuclear war with the quartet. But it's going to come about that the nations, the obedience of these nations, what is left of them, is going to come to you. That's the great gathering that Jeremiah is speaking of here. And he says in the last part of verse 8, they will dwell in their own land. Now remember Matthew 24:31, I will send my messengers, and they will gather together the elect. Now, from the four winds, remember that? Look at that again, Matthew 24:31. And he will send his malachim with the sound of the trumpet, that's the last trumpet, and they will gather together his elect. This last trumpet is the last warning. The trumpet shall blow. Remember that, Moshe 3. The trumpet will blow for the alarm. That's the same thing as taking place here. The warning takes place. The trumpet, with the great sound of a trumpet, and they will gather together his elect from the four winds. From four winds. Now, before you forget that, turn over to chapter 7 of Revelation. You've got to have this revelation to remember, to understand what he's talking about. He's not talking about four directions here. He's talking about four winds. Four winds. We're in that time of the four winds right now. Four winds that's actually going to burn this earth, as Revelation 18 shows. But look at Revelation 7, verse 1. And after these things I saw four malachim standing on four corners of the earth, holding back the four winds. The four winds, you see that? Holding back the four winds. What are they? Look right across the page, right across the columns there to chapter 6 and verse 7. And when he had opened the fourth seal, I heard, now these are the things that was closed, sealed. But now, in this time period, now, the last day, it's being opened up so that you can see and understand, visualize. And when he had opened the fourth seal, I heard the voice of the fourth living creature. This is the quartet. This living, active system of war. Actually, a wind of war. And he says, come and see. And I looked, and behold, a pale horse, and the name of him that sat upon him was Death, and Sheol, the grave, followed with him. And power was given unto them over that fourth part of the earth. Well, you can see it taking place right now. This is the wind of war that we're gathering Yahweh's people out of. You see it? Praise Yahweh. I hope everyone catches that. The wind of war that's taking place in the fourth part of the earth right now to kill with the sword that is war, with hunger, with pestilence, the same under the authority of the beast of the earth. This beast, hold your place right there and look on over to chapter 13. 13, and you'll hold your place and look to chapter 13 of Revelation. This is the beast that he's talking about. The beast of the earth. Now, if you remember, Daniel saw these four beasts. He said there's four beasts. Well, of course, he saw them gather and get together and make a great army. And this was all played out on the sea of glass for him to see. And he had us there showing him what was going to take place in this great scene, this television that we have access to today in this time of great knowledge. And Daniel saw this. Yochanan then saw it and wrote it down so I could teach it to Yahweh's servants in this time period that comes to pass shortly, or is cut short. Well, here is 13 verse 1. And I stood upon the sands of the sea and saw this beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns. The 7 heads are the 7 mountains on which this beast sits. It's a great city that reigns over the kings of the earth. That's all in Revelation 17. Notice the last part. The dragon gave him his power and his throne and great authority. Look on up to verse 6. And he opened his mouth in blasphemy against Yahweh, to blaspheme his name, and Yahshua's name, the Savior's name, and his house, the house of Yahweh. And it was given unto him to make war, The winds of war, given unto him to make the winds of war. He told you in chapter 7 what was going to take place in chapter 6. And then he shows you it's given unto him to make war. Then in verse 11 you see the 2-horned beast, Catholic and Protestant, in the United States. That's speaking of the United States right there, starting with verse 11 on down. This was the 4th seal now. And remember Daniel 12 and verse 4, the seal. Then the 4th living creature, that's to make war. Chapter 6 and verse 1, he says, and I saw when the Lamb opened one of his seals, and look at verse 2, he sees a white horse and war in his hand, the bow, standing for war. The authority given to him, you just read where he got his authority from chapter 13. Crown means authority, was given unto him, and he went out conquering and to conquer. This is the Vatican. Malachi Martin told about this conquering going to take place in his book, The Keys of This Blood, before it took place. We showed it in the Mark of the Beast in 1976. That book was written. And then the nuclear baby. That was 6 verse 1. Look at let's see, 6 verse 1. And remember 11 and verse 3, for the messenger, that's the messenger. I'll send my messengers to gather Yahweh's people, and he'll give the means to do so, which is the television. 6 verse 8, we covered that, the fourth part of the earth. And then the gathering, you see that in chapter 7 there take place. You see the people that actually, the number is actually given here of the people in chapter 7 of the tribes, and then in verse 9 there it shows a great number that no one could number. When you get up into the billions, it's hard. And we know that we're going to have about 2 billion people there that's going to become obedient. And Jeremiah 23:3, we say that we see this gathered. They gather. This is Yahweh's gathering. The same thing we see here in Revelation 7, the gathering, and then is the same thing that Jeremiah showed is going to be done by the branch and the donkey's coat, as also shown in Genesis 49:1. It's not just us. We're the vine, the branch, the donkeys, and the donkey coats. The foundation of Yahshua laid with his donkey, that is his 12 disciples, and that foundation is taught to the branch along with the work of each of Yahweh's prophets. It's so beautiful what Yahweh has pointed out here in this. He just lays it out where anyone could see it. And then all of this is given then for the witnesses to explain. And then, of course, to the last days witness, who was older brother was taken away from him. But we're doing it. We're reaching the world with the television. Those numbers, if we can get those next week, it'll make a lot more sense too, because we'll have visions. If I could show that one thing, let's see if I could find it here quickly. I wanted to get to Revelations 4, where it actually shows the eyes and the wings. I want to show you that part. And before we quit, turn over to Revelations 4, and you'll find it there. I think it's about verse 8. The face of the character of these four deadly kingdoms. They all combined, and one made stronger the other, and they all combined, and they all fighting with each other too. But the character of them is like the lion worshiping that's verse 7, shows like a lion. Then like the calf, the gods, which represented all the gods. And then the third character was the face of a man. This was all coming from mankind. And then you see they are flying like an eagle. Now these are the four beasts in this time period. And then he shows in verse 8, and each of the four had 6 wings. I wanted to show you this drone here, and notice the wings. And this is what they're doing their damage with today. It seems to be the drones, and that's what everybody fears, because it sneaks up on them, and they can't grasp it till it's already got its licks in. I've got some more here that I want to show you just a minute. There's a better one than this, but America drops 26,171 bombs in 2016. And they show the U.S. drone there. There's one of them there. This one is deadly. It's not a great shot, but it does have the 6 wings that you see here. There's a better one than that, if I can find it. And the satellites. It's hard to believe that they have as many satellites as they do, but these are looking down. Here's their eyes looking down from the satellites. This one has the amount. If you'll look at the amount, they're dotted there. If you can see those small dots, every one of these dots here, all of these thousands, hundreds of dots here are the satellites. Here's a better one even than that if you got a outer space view of it, of the satellites. That's called the eyes. Here's one of their 6-wing drones. There's another besides that. And then the eyes of these satellites now. If you'll look here, you'll see this one looking up to get a signal from this satellite, and as a rocket now coming towards us, this right here catches it from the signal of one of these eyes in the sky and sends a rocket to cut it off here. As it leaves here, it gets to here. This intercedes coming from this direction and to blast it out of the sky. 100 drones swarm, dropped from jets, plans its own moves. This all needs to be explained in detail, and Yahweh willing, we'll have it next week for you. But I hope I painted that picture well enough for you to understand that this great thing that is taking place right now among the nations is being prophesied by Yahweh's house. He set it in motion to all begin at one time. That we're in this short time period. It started in 1934, this work did. But now we're in the time period when we see the quartet in action. Also, Curry said the quartet is going to be there this week. That's the 15th. The 15th. Today's the 14th. Tomorrow, Curry said the quartet is going to be there, and they're going to get this moved into action. The Oslo Accord, which we're waiting on right now, that's what Yahweh showed Daniel that would take place, and that's a shortened time period, this time that they cut off, that still has to come to pass. That's got to come to pass, but with it then, the nuclear war, the nuclear burning, the darkening of the sun, and I'm serious about getting you some sleeping bags. This is something I think you're going to need, especially if the gas and heat supply is shut off. We could, it's a possibility you can take that sleeping bag with you, wherever we need to go. May Yahweh bless you, and I'll turn the services back to the next leader. I love you.